What if the empire you built with your own hands became the very thing that shattered your family? Could a father who lost everything ever reclaim the love of his daughter? What happens when the walls you've spent years building come crashing down, and all you have left is the regret of what could have been? Can redemption ever truly heal a broken bond, or is it too late to make things right? If this story struck a chord with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful, heart-wrenching tales of redemption, family, and second chances. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest releases. The towering skyscrapers that defined the cityscape seem to reflect Victor Wells's success, a self-made billionaire and the undisputed leader of one of the most influential construction empires in the country. At 47, Victor sat at the top of his game. His companies built cities from the ground up, shaping the skyline with steel and concrete. Contracts, meetings, business deals, these were his daily bread. There was no shortage of accolades, no lack of respect in boardrooms. Yet as the golden hour sunlight filtered through the windows of his penthouse office, Victor felt a nagging emptiness deep inside. He had everything a man could dream of: wealth, power, respect, and a life without limits. Yet his family life had crumbled into dust years ago. His estranged daughter, Emily, had been the one part of him he couldn't control, couldn't fix. He'd tried to suppress the painful memory, locking it away behind the polished glass and steel of his corporate empire. Emily, at 20, had walked out of his life after a devastating argument, a harsh, bitter exchange in which he had prioritized everything except his family. She left without a word, vanishing from his life like a phantom. His marriage had followed, falling apart soon after. His wife, too, had walked away, leaving him with only work to occupy his thoughts and fill the cavernous void left behind. Victor had buried himself in construction projects, walling off his emotions, clinging to his empire as if it could replace the family he had lost. But every now and then, when the world was quiet enough, when the weight of the glass towers around him seemed too much to bear, the thought of Emily crept back into his mind like a ghost. He wondered where she was, if she was happy, or if the anger she'd left with still simmered beneath the surface. The thought lingered as Victor made his way to one of his newest construction sites on the outskirts of the city. He had made no announcement of his visit, intending to remain unseen. Blending in with the crew for an honest assessment of the progress, he stood at the edge of the site, taking in the sprawling view of cranes, workers, and half-built structures. The sounds of hammers, drills, and saws filled the air, but it was one figure that caught his attention, working tirelessly in the midst of the chaos. A young woman no older than 25, with a focus and precision that set her apart from the rest of the laborers. She was laying bricks with the kind of meticulous care that made the process look almost artistic, her movements graceful and fluid, as though she were performing an intricate dance. Victor watched her for a moment, caught off guard by the intensity in her work. There was something eerily familiar about the way she moved, the way she stood tall, strong, and resolute under the blistering sun. But it couldn't be, could it? He dismissed the thought as quickly as it appeared. This was just a construction worker after all. But as he walked closer, his heart pounded in his chest. The set of her jaw, the way she tilted her head, the fire in her eyes, it was her. Emily? His voice cracked as the name escaped his lips, not quite believing it. The woman froze. Her hands stilled on the brick she was about to lay, and slowly she looked up. Her gaze met his, and for a moment time seemed to slow. There was no immediate recognition in her eyes, just a guarded stare, a look that spoke of years of distance and anger. Victor's breath caught in his throat. He stood there, rooted to the spot, as his mind struggled to process what was unfolding in front of him. The young woman was not only working on his site, she was his daughter, the same daughter he hadn't seen in over 6 years. The weight of the realization hit him like a freight train. His heart, which had long since learned to function without emotion, suddenly skipped a beat. He reached out, a trembling hand moving instinctively toward her, but Emily stepped back, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. She had changed, there was no denying that. The young girl who had once looked up to him with hope in her eyes had transformed into a woman, scarred by time, anger, and years of absence. Her face was hardened, her expression cold and distant. "Emily," Victor whispered again, this time more urgently, his voice filled with disbelief. "Is it really you?" Her lips tightened into a thin line as she nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "Yeah, it's me." Victor's knees felt weak as he looked at her, at the girl he had failed, the daughter he had abandoned for the sake of his empire. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times in his mind, but never like this. Never with the harsh reality of the woman standing before him. The woman who had once been his world. His voice faltered as he struggled for the right words. "I never thought I'd see you again. I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't mean for things to end this way," she scoffed, an icy bitterness in her tone. "You didn't mean for it to end this way. You didn't even notice when it did." Victor flinched, the weight of her words hitting him harder than any construction project he had ever led. He had built empires, broken barriers, and achieved greatness. But none of it meant anything if he couldn't rebuild the one thing that truly mattered, his family. As Emily turned to walk away, the sound of her footsteps echoing across the construction site, Victor's heart thudded painfully in his chest. He wanted to reach out, to pull her back, to beg for her forgiveness. But she was already gone, swallowed by the sea of workers, and for the first time in years Victor knew what real loss felt like. Victor stood frozen for a moment after Emily walked away. His mind raced, heart thundering in his chest. It couldn't have been a coincidence. It was her. The same young woman who had once run to him with joy in her eyes, now distant and unrecognizable. He was left standing in the middle of the construction site, feeling like a spectator in his own life. The overwhelming confusion and shock weighed heavily on him, and for the first time in years, he felt like he didn't know what to do. He couldn't just let this moment slip by. He had to know more, he had to understand. He followed her through the maze of workers, his footsteps quickening as he closed the distance between them. There was a mix of urgency and something else, guilt, longing, and unspoken hope that maybe, just maybe, he could fix what had been broken. "Emily, wait!" His voice was hoarse, a pleading note creeping in as he caught up with her. She stopped in her tracks but didn't turn to face him. Her posture was stiff, like a wall he couldn't break. "Why are you working here?" Victor asked, unable to keep the curiosity from his voice. The question felt almost wrong, as if he were questioning her worth, but he couldn't help it. The image of her, once a naive girl with big dreams and hopes, now laying bricks with such precision and focus, it didn't add up. "How did you end up here?" Emily slowly turned her head to look at him, her eyes hard, narrowing at his presence. "Why does it matter?" she asked, her voice laced with a bitterness that caught him off guard. "It matters because I thought—" Victor stopped himself, suddenly aware of the weight of his words. How could he have thought anything about her life? He hadn't been there, hadn't made an effort to even reach out. "I just don't understand. Why here? Why now?" Emily's lips twisted into a faint, mocking smile. "Do you think I just woke up one day and decided to lay bricks? No, I chose this life. After I left, I didn't want to be in your world anymore, not after how everything fell apart. I needed to be somewhere far from everything you built, far from your influence." Victor's heart sank at her words. The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. She had left not just because of the fights or the neglect, but because she needed something entirely different, something he couldn't provide. She had sought peace in the very thing he had spent his life controlling. But why construction? He pressed, his voice quieter now. "You could have done anything. You were always so smart, so full of potential. Why this?" Emily's expression hardened further, and for a moment, Victor saw the walls she had built up around herself. "You think I could just be someone you wanted me to be? I had to survive, Victor. I couldn't do it on my own in the world you created. This," she gestured at the construction site around them, "this is real. This is work I can touch, feel, see the results of. No one telling me what to do, no expectations. It's mine." Victor's mind was still reeling. "But why work here on my site? Why be part of my world again if you hate it so much?" Emily shook her head, her eyes colder than he had ever seen them. "It's not your world anymore, Dad. This is my life, my choice. You have no say in it. You can't just walk in and expect things to go back to the way they were." I don't need your pity or your charity. I'm here because I want to be here." Victor opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He wanted to apologize, to say something that could bridge the vast chasm of years between them. Instead, the silence between them was suffocating. Her eyes softened, but only for a second. "I'm not here because of you, Dad. I'm here because I needed to be. You're the one who decided work was more important than anything else. You pushed me out of your life the moment you chose to ignore me, for that damn empire of yours. I've carried that anger for years, and I'm not ready to forgive you, not yet." Victor's throat tightened as the weight of her words pressed down on him. He could feel the guilt gnawing at his insides, his earlier questions fading into the background. He'd asked the wrong ones. Why she was working here didn't matter. The real question was why he hadn't been there for her, why he had let her slip through his fingers without even realizing it. "Emily," he said, his voice almost a whisper. No," she cut him off, shaking her head slowly. "I'm not here for you to fix things. You can't just buy your way back into my life or make things better with money or a title. I've built something for myself, something real. This is where I belong now." Victor felt his chest tighten, but there was something else in her voice, something softer, deeper. A hint of pain buried beneath the anger. He had been the one to push her away, but in her words, he could also hear the trace of a person still trying to understand, trying to reconcile the daughter she had been with the woman she had become. "I'm sorry," Victor finally said, the words feeling too small, too insignificant for the weight of the moment. But they were all he had to offer. Emily's gaze softened just a little. "Sorry doesn't change anything, Victor, but maybe it's a start." She looked at him one last time, her eyes filled with emotion that she didn't fully let show. "I don't expect you to fix everything. I just want you to know that I'm okay. I've survived." With that, she turned away again, her back straight and her pace deliberate. And as Victor stood there, watching the woman who had once been his daughter disappear into the throng of workers, he realized that this was the hardest thing he'd ever had to face. The past hadn't just left him, it had left Emily too, and no amount of success could bring her back into his arms. Only time, patience, and maybe, just maybe, the smallest glimmer of trust could begin to heal the wounds he had caused. Victor sat in his sleek, glass-walled office, staring out at the city below, but his mind was far from the skyline he had worked so hard to build. Emily's words echoed in his mind. "Sorry doesn't change anything, but maybe it's a start." She was right. A few words, no matter how sincere, could never erase the years of neglect, the years of absence that had torn apart their family. Days passed after their initial reunion, but the ache in Victor's chest never subsided. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something deeper behind Emily's departure. He couldn't stand the thought of losing her again. So he took a step that he knew would be difficult, even impossible. He reached out. It was a phone call that led to a fragile meeting between father and daughter, held in a small, dimly lit cafe away from the glare of his business empire. Emily was wary, but she agreed to meet. She walked in with a guarded expression, as if she were walking into a battlefield, not a cafe. Victor stood, his breath caught in his throat, unsure of how to bridge the widening chasm between them. "Emily," Victor started, his voice heavy with emotion. "There's so much I need to understand. I know I wasn't there for you, but I've spent these years thinking about you, wondering why you left, why things got so bad between us." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm ready to listen. Please tell me what happened." Emily stared at him for a moment, the flicker of emotion she had shown at the construction site absent now, replaced by an almost impenetrable wall. "You really want to know?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "You're not just trying to fix things because it's the right thing to do now, are you?" Victor's throat tightened. "No. I want to know because I failed you, and I can't keep living with that. I need to know why you left. I need to understand everything, everything you went through." She let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "You really have no idea, do you?" Her eyes locked onto his. "You never saw the cracks. You never saw the things that were falling apart because you were too busy building your empire." Victor's heart sank as he recognized the familiar pain in her voice. She was right. For years he had built structures of steel and concrete, but his own family had crumbled in the shadow of those towers. His obsession had blinded him to the cracks, to the warning signs, to the needs of the very people who had loved him. Emily leaned back in her chair, arms crossed tightly. "You want to know what happened? The real reason I left? The truth is, it wasn't just about you being too busy. It wasn't just about the hours you spent on work. It was one night that changed everything." Victor felt his chest tighten. He wasn't prepared for this. "What do you mean?" he whispered, though he was terrified of what might follow. She took a slow, deliberate breath, her eyes softening for just a moment. "I saw something the night I left, something that shattered everything I thought I knew about our family. It wasn't just you working too much. It was her." Victor felt a sharp pang in his chest. "What are you talking about? Your mother?" Emily nodded, her gaze distant. "Yes, Mom. I saw how you treated her. Not just the long hours and the work, but the way you ignored her. The way she kept crying in silence, hoping you'd notice. I overheard something between you two one night. I didn't know how to deal with it." Her voice quivered slightly as she paused, but she continued. "I heard you talking about her. You didn't love her anymore. You were just going through the motions, and that night I realized it wasn't just your work that broke us. It was the way you stopped caring about her. You stopped loving her." Victor felt like the room was spinning. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of memories, but it all felt too distant, too hazy. He had been so focused on his career, so determined to climb higher, that he hadn't seen the slow unraveling of his marriage. "Emily, I never—" He started, but his voice trailed off as he struggled to form the right words. She cut him off, her voice hard. "You never saw it because you didn't want to. You were so focused on building your empire that you couldn't see your own wife falling apart. And I couldn't take it anymore. So I left. I had to. But that night, when I overheard you, it was the final blow." Victor closed his eyes as if shutting out the pain of the past, but the weight of it still pressed on him. His mind flashed back to that night, the late-night meetings, the endless phone calls, the work that never seemed to end. His wife Margaret, sitting alone at the dinner table, quietly folding napkins, waiting for him to come home. But he'd been too absorbed in the drive for success to notice the loneliness in her eyes. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. He had been so busy building something that he never stopped to consider what was crumbling around him. He had neglected the one person who had stood by him through it all, his wife, and in doing so, he had unknowingly pushed his daughter away. "I never knew," Victor whispered, his voice barely audible. "I had no idea she felt like that. I never realized what I was doing to her. To both of you." His voice cracked with the weight of his guilt. Emily looked at him with a mixture of sadness and anger. "You were so busy, Dad. But you didn't see us, you didn't see her, and when I saw the pain in her eyes that night, I couldn't stay. I had to leave." Victor felt his heart shatter as the truth unfolded before him. He had never understood the depth of the damage he had caused. His obsession had blinded him to everything that truly mattered: the love, the trust, the family that had once been his foundation. As Emily finished speaking, the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. The truth was finally out. And with it came a flood of self-reflection, a painful understanding of his role in the broken family he had left behind. Emily sat back in her chair, her arms still crossed, but there was a glimmer of something else in her eyes, a vulnerability, a crack in the armor she had spent years building. Victor's mind was reeling, but as he looked at the woman who had once been his daughter, he knew that the path to redemption was far from over. But now, at least, he understood why she had left, and why, despite everything, he still had a chance to make things right. The day after their painful conversation, Victor sat in the stillness of his office, staring out at the city below, but the view didn't seem to matter anymore. The skyline that had once represented everything he'd worked for, his empire, now felt like a symbol of the hollow man he had become. His heart ached, the weight of Emily's words lingering in his chest like a suffocating fog. For years, he had lived his life for success, for power, for the validation that came with building something monumental. But now, as he sat in the silence of his empty office, he realized that the very thing he had built had cost him the only thing that mattered: his family. His mind replayed the moment when Emily had revealed her pain, the raw honesty in her voice, as she recounted the years of emotional turmoil she had lived through. Her anger, her resentment, it all made sense now. Every failed attempt to reconnect, every cold distance between them had been because of him. Victor, the CEO, the man who had commanded boardrooms, made life-altering decisions with a snap of his fingers, was nothing more than an empty shell in that moment. He had been so consumed by his ambition that he had forgotten how to feel. He had forgotten how to be a father. As the realization set in, something shifted deep within him. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel vulnerable. He wasn't the powerful leader of his company anymore. He was just a father who had failed his daughter, and that truth hit him harder than any business deal or construction project ever had. He had ignored his family for the sake of success, and in doing so, he had destroyed the one thing that had given him meaning in life. It was late afternoon when Emily agreed to meet him again. They sat at a small cafe, the air filled with an unspoken tension. Emily arrived first, her expression unreadable. Victor could see the guarded walls she had built around herself, but there was something different this time. A faint softness in her eyes, a slight openness that hadn't been there before. Victor took a deep breath and began, his voice filled with sincerity and regret. "Emily, I've spent a lot of time thinking about everything you said, and I've realized something. I've spent so many years chasing success and power, thinking they would fulfill me, but they never did. The man I've become, I don't even recognize him. I see now that I neglected you. I neglected us for the sake of something that didn't matter in the end." Emily's eyes flickered with something, uncertainty maybe. Her arms were still crossed, her posture still defensive, but there was a subtle shift. Victor's voice wavered as he continued, his heart laid bare. "I was wrong, Emily. I was so focused on being successful that I lost sight of everything that truly mattered. I lost you, and I can't take back the years I wasted. But I want you to know that I'm ready to change. For you. For us." The words felt heavy, like they carried the weight of years of regret. But there was a part of Victor that felt lighter now, free almost, as though for the first time in his life he had let go of the need to control everything. All that was left now was the truth. Emily's gaze softened for a moment, but the wall she had built remained strong. She was torn between the anger she had carried for so long and the part of her that wanted something more. She wanted to believe him, to believe that he could change, but it was difficult. She had lived without him for so long, learned how to survive on her own. The scars of the past were still fresh, the hurt still real. And yet as she looked at him, truly looked at him, she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. A man willing to admit his mistakes. A man who had suffered as much, if not more, than she had. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Emily said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did, but—" She paused, searching for the right words. "But I want to try. I want to see if there's still something left here. Maybe we can rebuild what we had, even if it takes time." Victor's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. He knew it wouldn't be easy, that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but for the first time, he felt like there was hope. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I'm ready to be the father you deserve. No more work, no more empire. Just us." Emily gave a small, cautious nod, her lips trembling with the weight of her emotions. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not fully, but it was a step, one that neither of them had expected to take so soon. The next few weeks were filled with small moments of progress. Emily remained cautious, reluctant to open up completely, but she allowed Victor back into her life piece by piece. They spent time together outside of the world he had built, walking through the city, talking about things other than work, reconnecting over shared memories from their past. Victor spent every moment he could with her, learning to listen, to truly hear what she was saying, not just nodding along while thinking about business. He left the office early some days, letting his assistant handle the calls and emails, prioritizing Emily instead. It was a new feeling, this balancing act between work and family, but it was one that felt right. One day, after weeks of quiet progress, Victor visited the construction site again. This time it was different. He wasn't there as the CEO. He wasn't there to oversee progress or demand results. He was just there, standing in the background, watching his daughter work. As he stood at the edge of the site, he saw Emily again, her hands covered in dirt, her focus entirely on the task at hand. But this time she wasn't a stranger to him. She was his daughter, a woman who had been through so much yet had found her own strength. He watched her not as a leader but as a father. The father he had always wanted to be but hadn't known how to be until now, and for the first time in years, Victor smiled, not because of his empire, but because he saw the possibility of something real. Something that had been broken, but now slowly was beginning to heal. As Emily turned to glance at him, there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something more than just acceptance. It was a glimmer of hope, not for the past but for the future. For the first time, Victor knew that despite all the mistakes, despite all the pain, they could find a way back to each other. The road ahead would be long, but it was a road he was willing to walk together.